Dave Daniels stood at the glass door of the community center, pretending to be minding his own business. But he was visibly upset as he stood there waiting for his ex-wife to arrive, and he was desperately trying to keep himself from having a nervous breakdown. It was Wednesday night, and that meant co-parenting class. An hour of forced maturity and being reminded that his ex-wife doesn't give a damn about him anymore. Beside him was Cedric, one of his co-parenting classmates, sometime his moral support, but he was the last person you want to tell your personal problems to. But Dave did it. He gave Cedric the tea, so to speak, the kind of news that makes a man's stomach queasy. Dave found out that his ex-wife, Keisha, was dating Baily. Yes, Baily. The Coy College turned pro football wide receiver, now TV sports analyst. The guy's a Coy Island legend. Dave was having an emotional glitch. He kept blinking in manic, yet Cedric talks shit in a way only a brutally honest friend could, saying, Baily? As in professional football wide receiver? Damn, bro. That's crazy. Dave snapped back. Damn, bro, what? Talking loud and defensive. Don't say damn, bro. Why are you saying damn, bro, to me? Cedric, matter of fact and telling it like it is, told him, because Bear has a lot of money and he's famous. He's probably got a big house too, he said, while holding on to that silly smirk like a child with no filter. And that pissed Dave off even more as he vocally erupted saying, big fucking deal. I have money and a house too. Cedric gave a satirical smirk and goes, yeah, but it's not a big house and you don't have Baily kind of money. If you did, you wouldn't be living in the hood. You would have a big house on the ocean. Like Baily. You would drive a fancy luxurious car. Like Baily. But Dave closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and asked, what is this? Kick Dave in the ding-ding-day or something. Do me a favor, Cedric. Shut the hell up, please, and thank you. And Cedric did just that. They just stood there in silence even though Cedric was standing there smiling from ear to ear, entertained by the drama Dave was going through. Then the air shifted. That scent, Keisha's perfume. It always arrived before she did. Sweet, sharp, and impossible to ignore. Dave straightened his clothes and wiped his sweaty palms on his pants, trying to appear to be normal, like he wasn't still emotionally wounded. Keisha swept through the hallway like she had somewhere better to be, which, honestly, she usually did. Looking good, smelling good, modeling her beautiful brown skin, long silk-pressed hair. She was all that, and a cutie with a cute booty. He called out to her, trying to sound casual, but it came out needy, asking, are you going to tell me what's going on? She turned, already annoyed, saying, are you speaking of my friend Bear? Yes, Dave roared as they came to a sudden stop just before the classroom door. She knew she was going to have this conversation with Dave. She was prepared for it, so she took a deep breath and let it rip, saying, okay, listen up, because I'm going to tell it like it is. And trust me when I say that, I will never repeat this ever again. Okay? Now listen. I met Bear back in elementary school, so we've known each other a very long time. We met up again about a year ago. We talked on the phone a few times, went on a couple of dates, hung out with mutual friends. Then we decided we enjoyed each other's company a little more, intimately. And just like a sudden earthquake, Dave was shook. Not exactly what he wanted to hear, the word intimately. Alone nearly sent Dave into cardiac arrest. His brain swiftly replayed it on a loop, each time with new visual effects he didn't ask for. Oh my God! And then what? He asked, as he paused to look at Keisha's facial expressions as if he could see what she was thinking. Then he asked, are you having sex with Bear? That question caught Keisha completely and totally off guard. She just stood there trying not to make eye contact with Dave with a mischievous grin on her face. Oh, come on, Keisha. Are you kidding me? Oh my God. My wife is screwing Bear Bailey. She's boning the bear. She's banging the bear. Stop it, Dave, she demanded. She was reaching for a serious approach to have an adult conversation about it. She said, "First of all, I am no longer your wife. I am your ex-wife, understand? Ex-wife. That fiasco ended over a year ago. And second, you better get used to this because our daughter just so happened to be in the same class with Bear's daughter, and they have been best friends since Glory started going to school there." Dave rolled his eyes at Keisha thinking, "Oh yeah? How convenient." Keisha gave him an evil grin and a pat on his chest and goes, "Dave, I don't know why this is bothering you so much, but if you have an issue with it, take it up with Bear." As she turned and walked into the classroom, the co-parenting classroom looked exactly like what you'd expect from a community center on a Wednesday night. Fluorescent lights, tiny student desks that's too small for adults, and motivational posters that hadn't motivated anyone since the 90s. Dave and Keisha walked in late, which wasn't new. Everyone in the room turned to look, including Dr. Davenport, a cheerful man with the patience of a saint, and the wardrobe of someone who owned too many beige sweaters. He grinned like a game show host and said, "Oh, look what the wind blew into our co-parenting class today. Welcome aboard, Dave and Keisha." Keisha, without missing a beat, rolled her eyes and said, "Whatever, Dr. Davenport. Can you just teach this class and say what you gotta say so we can go home and do something more entertaining?" That was Keisha's way of doing things, direct, beautiful, and allergic to pleasantries. Dr. Davenport nodded politely, the way teachers do when they know they've lost control but are trying to pretend otherwise. "We were just discussing the benefits of co-parenting," he said. And that's when Keisha decided to raise her hand. Always a bad sign. "I have a question," she announced in front of everyone. "I Googled co-parenting," she said. And of course, she wasn't alone. Half the room chimed in like it was a support group for people addicted to solving their problems through Google search. Dr. Davenport just sighed and said, "Don't do that. Googling co-parenting is like Googling flu symptoms. It'll tell you the wrong diagnoses with the wrong treatment plan and scare the hell out of you in the process." Everyone laughed, especially Cedric, who sat near the front. He shouted that he once Googled his 8-year-old daughter's headache. It turned out to be an ear infection, but the internet told him the child was pregnant, which only made everyone laugh harder. Yet, Dave didn't laugh. He was too busy trying to lay low, hoping this class would somehow stay away from his personal business. But fate, or Keisha, had other plans. She cleared her throat dramatically and said, "Well, before I say this, I don't mean to kill nobody's little boy ego," as Keisha pointed straight at Dave, and continued saying, "Some people used co-parenting as a way to control their ex." The class exploded into chatter. Cedric complained about his ex-wife. His ex-wife yelled profanities back at him. Someone mentioned child support. Everyone had something disheartening to say. Dr. Davenport tried to restore order, but it was too late. The room had become a full-blown therapy riot. Then Keisha, always knowing how to hold a spotlight, raised her voice over the noise. She said, "Dave used co-parenting to keep tabs on me, where I go, how long I'm there, and who I'm with." Then she threw in, with a little shoulder roll, "That ain't none of Dave's business what I'm doing and who I'm doing it with, you know? I might want to spend the night and make a little something happen." Boom! The whole room went into a thunderous round of applause and cheer. Even Dr. Davenport sat at the edge of his seat like he knew the shit was about to hit the fan. And Dave, red-faced and desperate, blurted out, "It's not fair. We were together 8 years. I'm not used to not knowing where she was." But Keisha didn't soften. She tilted her head, almost sympathetic, and said, "So you are using this co-parenting thing to control me. You just want to know about Bear so you can ruin my relationship with a good man. Get over it, Dave. It's been years already." The room perked up. Dr. Davenport said, "Oh, let me guess," he said. "Bear's the new boyfriend?" Keisha confirmed it, proudly. "Yes, that's my new man. Y'all know Big Bear Baily, Coy College legend, pro football player and media analyst." But the word man hit Dave like a slap. His voice cracked slightly as he said, "Your man? You didn't say he was your man. You said he was your friend." And just like that, the room transformed from a parenting class into a gossip panel. Everyone whispered. A few gasped. Dave sat there stunned. He'd been demoted from husband to nobody in his own life story. He slouched down into his chair, slammed his hand on the desk, and said, "This is bullshit, Keisha. Straight up bullshit." Keisha smirked, delivered the final blow, and said, "I already told you. If you've got a problem with it, take it up with Bear." And with that, she sat back, crossed her legs, and folded her arms. Perfectly content, perfectly composed, perfectly Keisha. Dave walked out of co-parenting class and took the long drive across the island. All he could think about was Bear Baily, Keisha, and that smug grin she'd flashed when she said, "Take it up with Bear." So he did. He'd never been inside a television studio before, but he walked in that afternoon like he owned the network. His heart was pounding, and he was ready to confront his new arch-rival, Bear Baily. The studio was winding down for the day. The crew had packed up their cameras and scripts, the anchors had signed off with their perfect smiles, and the smell of burnt coffee still lingered in the air. Everyone had left. Everyone except Bear Baily, who was sitting on the edge of the production desk, laughing with one of his producers. And then came Dave. He appeared in the doorway like a man ready for war, though he looked more like someone about to lose one. "Bear?" he called out. Bear turned slowly, gleaming in his tailored suit like confidence had a dress code. He grinned and humorously said, "Halt! Who goes there?" Dave didn't laugh. He wasn't there for jokes. "It's Dave," he said. "Remember me? From Coy College? I was an athletic trainer." Bear squinted, searching the memory. Then his face lit up with that charming Kool-Aid smile and goes, "Oh yeah, Daniel." But Dave quickly interrupted. "It's Dave," while forcing a grin. Bear nodded as if that cleared up everything. He said, "Sorry, I stand corrected, Dave." "Which would also make you Keisha's ex-husband." Dave gave an awkward smile, like a man trying to prove he was harmless, even though he was plotting to hurt someone. He said, "This, thing you and Keisha have going on, I'm sure it's not too serious, right? I mean, after all, Keisha and I have a child together." Bear smiled the way rich men smile when they're about to crush you with politeness. "Yeah, your daughter, Glory. She's a sweetheart. Her and my daughter are best friends. I love that little girl, like she's my very own." Dave froze. His eye twitched. There it was. The line. The "I love her like she's my own" speech. He felt his blood pressure spike. He straightened his back, pointed a trembling finger, and said, "Okay, cut the crap, Bear." When people say stuff like that, it drives me insane. Bear raised an eyebrow. "Whoa, slow down there, Brad," almost intentionally saying the wrong name again. Dave snapped. "It's Dave. Get it through your thick skull. Dave, Dave, Dave. Okay? My name is Dave. Damn, bro." Bear chuckled, a low, confident laugh that sounded like it came with its own studio audience. "Okay, Dave," he said calmly. "It's time for you to go." The producer, sensing drama, started inching closer, ready to record. Within seconds, two security guys appeared like magic. Just as soon as Dave puffed up his chest, he was refusing to back down. He shouted, If you step 1 foot closer to my daughter ever again, I will expose Bear Baily for the crybaby, piece of shit you really are, in front of the entire world." The room went silent. Even the cameras seemed to stop humming. Bear smirked, leaned back on the desk and said, "Do it, Sugarfoot. Give me the reason to put my foot up your ass." Dave blinked and asked for clarity, saying, "Sugarfoot?" Bear just smiled wider. And that was the moment Dave completely lost it. He jabbed a finger toward Bear and said, "I've got your Sugarfoot, you locker room exotic dancer. Freak nasty." Security grabbed him before he could finish whatever that sentence was going to become, and as they carried him toward the door, Dave twisted around one last time, yelling, "You hear me, Bear? Stay away from my wife and daughter, you little freak nasty freakazoid." Bear just laughed, calm, cool, and unbothered. The internet did what the internet does best. It turned personal embarrassment into public spectacle. A clip of Dave storming into the studio, calling Bear a locker room exotic dancer, and then being carried out by security, had migrated from a shaky phone video to every local morning show and social feed by sundown. It was short, stupid, and glorious in the worst possible way. Bear watched the first repost with the half-interested amusement of a man who knew his face was national property. He watched himself on the screen, the calm, unbothered smile, the poised, laughing at the term, "Do it, Sugarfoot." And then he watched the rest, the part where Dave flailed like a man trying to use a distant fight fantasy to somehow make himself feel like a badass. When the clip finished, Bear laughed out loud, although he could be terrifying when he wanted to. The public saw him mostly as a big, soft man who'd been paid to look dominant for a living. Still, there was a chivalrous, possessive flicker in him now, not because he feared Dave's words, but because Dave had intruded into his workplace. He looked at Keisha and said, "If he shows up at my job again, I'm gonna cut him into little pieces and dump him in the Koi River. They'll never find his ass." Said like a cartoon villain than a plan. Keisha, lounging on the sofa with her phone, laughed the laugh she used when something absurd hit the right comedic frequency. She could see through Bear's posturing. He wasn't a fighter. He was a sports announcer whose aggression was mostly reserved for ratings and football commentary. "Bear, don't be like that," she said, eyes smiling. "You know you ain't gon' fight nobody. You big teddy bear." Bear frowned, petulant in the way of big men pretending to be menacing. "But does he know that?" "No, he doesn't," he said, half serious. Keisha rolled her eyes and flicked the TV remote so the local news replayed Dave's best and worst moment for the 10th time. Watching the loop, she felt oddly turned on by Bear's protectiveness. It was absurd, theatrical, a rom-com subplot with bad decisions. Bear interrupted her teasing with a goofy, menacing whisper. "And if you tell him," he said, playing at menace, "I'll choke you ass till you almost pass out." Keisha laughed, delighted. She leaned forward, the kind of lean that said she liked danger as long as it came with a laugh track. "Oh, really?" she asked, eyebrow cocked. Bear smirked and elaborated the threat like it was a ridiculous bedtime story. He painted a ludicrous picture of letting someone almost drift into unconsciousness, then easing off, equally absurd and oddly tender in its lack of seriousness. The pantomime of violence was clearly performative, part macho theater, part flirtation. Keisha laughed harder, then let her voice thicken. "Kinky," she said delightedly. "Don't threaten me with a good time." They both laughed, the sound of two people who had weathered more than public scenes and private slights, and found for the moment a ridiculous intimacy in mocking the spectacle together. On the TV, Dave's face cycled through gifable expressions, angry, betrayed, and then, briefly, ridiculous. Bear wasn't going to actually dump anyone in the river. He wasn't going to choke anyone into a fainting spell. What Bear had, what he enjoyed, was the right to be amused and the right to protect the perimeter of his life, loudly and with bravado. It was easier than actual confrontation and cuter too. And somewhere between the laughs and the TV reruns, Keisha felt a small, disquieting thrill. The world was watching her ex-husband flail, and Bear was still sitting next to her, not just as a headline, but as someone who would, in his own theatrical way, show up. That was the part of the narrative she liked. The drama had become domestic, and domestic, for now, suited her just fine. The classroom felt smaller this week. Or maybe it was just the electricity between two people making the air thick. Dave and Keisha sat only a couple of chairs apart, which made every glance a tiny battlefront. Their eyes kept meeting and sliding away. Dr. Davenport, bless his heart, was in full motivational teacher mode. He spoke about sacrifice and choosing the child over the conflict, and then asked the room to applaud themselves. It was the kind of moment that asked for quiet dignity. But Dave gave them more than dignity. He gave them an ovation. He clapped longer than anyone else, loud, a little too emphatic, like a man trying to laugh at a joke before he understands it. He sounded to the people paying attention borderline tipsy or just emotionally unhinged. "Well, aren't we proud?" Dave said, then scoffed and leaned into the dangerous kind of honesty that only fuels small groups. "Are you really proud of yourselves?" "No, you're all just a bunch of losers. Just like me," he said, as he smiled and bumped fists with the dad next to him, like they were in on a private joke. Dave continued, "All you want is to love your child, and maybe get a little booty from your ex every now and then." He pointed at Keisha, theatrically. "Unless you got a new man that you let my child spend time with, you disrespectful little hoochie mama." Keisha's face tightened. She opened to speak, but Dave cut her off like a bad DJ cutting a record saying, "Zip it, baby, 'cause whatever you have to say, I don't want to hear it." Then he lunged for the real point. "Now I need to see my daughter, right now." "Where is she?" Keisha answered flatly. "Glory is with Bear and his daughter. They're heading to the kids' festival after Bear's afternoon broadcast." Dave's jaw dropped into a public proclamation. "Over my dead body," as he stared into Keisha's eye with a look of seriousness. "I think it's time I paid Bear another visit. Playtime is over. Let him know I'm on my way." He rose as if he'd already rehearsed the swagger of a hero in a story where heroes always win. Keisha's voice softened, trying to reach the brain behind the bravado. "Dave, please don't." He made it clear. "If you show up at his job again, he's gonna hurt you." Her words were practical. They were also truth. But Dave didn't care. He marched on like a soldier in the army of the Lord. The class rose like a single organism. They followed closely behind while Dr. Davenport's face shifted from clinical calm to genuine panic. He lifted his hands in prayer and said, "Lord, help this damn fool." And then he was up and moving, following Dave, Keisha, and the rest of the class as Dave strode out into the hallway and out to his car. Keisha burst through the double doors like a woman with one mission as she barreled into the parking lot just as Dave's battered sedan started to take off. The car door flew open and Keisha dropped into the passenger seat. Then the argument resumed, louder and faster than the engine. "Seriously, Dave? Seriously?" Keisha demanded. "Put on your seatbelt and shut your pie hole," he snapped. But Keisha wasn't having it. She leaned in, voice urgent and sharp, saying, "I'm here to save you from yourself. Don't do this. You're gonna do something you'll regret for the rest of your life." Dave snorted like a man who'd already accepted regret as his life's pattern. He said, "I already did something I'll regret for the rest of my life." I married your pretty black ass. And then he added the worst possible line he could think of. The words landed like a thrown bottle. Keisha's face tightened for a beat. She was furious and stunned. Shame on you, Dave. I can't believe you would say something like that. Then Dave goes, "Oh, that's nothing. I have a lot more to say." He swerved the car, his driving suddenly reckless as classmates shouted from behind and tried to keep up. Keisha gripped the dashboard and braced. "Oh, Lord," she muttered, half laugh, half curse, as Dave, apparently determined to burn every bridge in reach, started unloading petty grievances. He went after her family next, saying, "Yeah, I never liked your dad. He's cheating on your mom," he announced. "How dare you?" Keisha spat. "My dad is a minister of the gospel, a humble man, a man of great value." Dave answered, "Great value? Like Walmart?" Then with a sarcastic, ridiculous jab about her mother, he moved into an absurd juvenile territory, saying, "Your mother is always looking at my piece," punctuating the insult with a pointed gesture toward his crouch. "Oh yeah, she loves my magic stick." Keisha laughed at the ridiculousness, pinching her fingers theatrically to mock whatever claim Dave had just pointed to. She said, "Don't even try it. Your piece ain't all that, little man." And then, as if trying to close the litter box on whatever dignity he had left, Dave leaned in with a final, shocking confession. He looked at her and arrogantly said, "And guess what else? I voted for Trump." The line hung there, heavier than anything he'd said all afternoon. Keisha's reaction was immediate and physical: a slap, a punch, an elbow to his face, a kick to the dashboard. "You what?" she shrieked. Then, hand on his cheek, she hit him again, words tumbling out. "I hate you. I hate you," she repeated, half sob, half rant. He stomped the brake in front of the TV station, the car jerking to a stop. He didn't wait to think. He threw the door open, sprinted out through the parking lot, and ran toward the studio like a man finishing the last scene of a bad movie. Behind him, his co-parenting classmates poured behind him in a single anxious wave, Dr. Davenport in shocked pursuit, bystanders enthusiastically observing, Cedric running along. The group chased him into the TV station, half there to stop him, and half there because, frankly, the spectacle was too good to miss. And Dave ran toward trouble with the confidence of a man who'd already decided the world owed him a resolution. He didn't see the cameras, the producers, or the very real consequences waiting inside. All he saw was the path ahead and the idea, ridiculous and dangerous, that he could fix everything with one more entrance. They burst into the studio like a storm front, Dave, Keisha, and of the co-parenting class, doors swinging, footsteps loud enough to rattle the teleprompter. Cameras were hot, lights were bright. Producers froze, then pivoted into survival mode. Keisha's voice sliced through the noise. "Dave, stop it. Please." But Dave had a single-mindedness that sounded a lot like panic. He pushed forward and, in the middle of a live broadcast, aimed his words at Bear. "If you lay a hand on my daughter, I'll... He couldn't finish. The sentence collapsed under its own heat. A producer's calm, brittle command cut through the chaos. "Wait, wait. Keep it live. Do not go to commercial. Stay right here." Hands moved instinctively to hold Dave back, to keep the on-air drama contained. Bear, impeccably composed at his desk, let the insult roll off him like water. He smirked and taunted. "So, what are you gonna do, water boy?" As the room tittered with the sort of cruel delight that TV loves, Keisha, sharp as ever, couldn't resist the correction. "Hold up. Water boy? Dave, you didn't tell me you were the water boy. You said you were the strength and conditioning coach," Dave snapped, defending himself saying, "I was not the water boy." Bear scoffed at the image of Dave's past role, saying, "Strength and conditioning coach? Don't make me laugh. Look at his pudgy ass. He ain't never did a push-up in his whole entire life." The audience in the studio and at home leaned into the spectacle, microphones hung on every syllable. Somewhere in the control room, Mary, an on-air host, felt the ratings spike in real time. She murmured into her earpiece, "Yes, I agree. Let's make room for this gentleman on the panel. I have a few questions." A producer barked, "Camera 2, zoom in on the new subject." Mary pivoted, all professional teeth and poised curiosity. On live television, she introduced him saying, "You've been all over the news accusing Bear of being, and I quote, a locker room exotic dancer. Then you called him freak nasty and you threatened to expose him. So, welcome to Sports Live. Now, you can tell your story." The invitation was both an opportunity and a bad idea. Dave suddenly thrust into TV's bright pinhole spotlight and said, "Thank you," then took the stage. Mary asked if he wanted to say anything to Bear, but Bear leaned forward, voice low with polite menace, saying, "Let me say this. You get one chance to save yourself, Waterboy. What you say can count against you. You need to save yourself." Dave, for the first time since he'd barged in, took a breath and steadied oddly. Calm and hyped at once, he called Bear a snake. The word was simple, but it lit a fuse. Bear stood. The energy in the studio shifted like a weather front, two animals aware of territory and Bear was about to attack. Mary tried to play referee, saying, "Wait a minute, Bear. Let him finish. Go ahead, Darren." Dave flinched at the wrong name and scolded, "It's Dave, damn it." Then Bear explained, "I'm dating Waterboy's ex-wife and our daughters are best friends, and he can't handle it." Dave said, "I can't handle it? Well now, as promised, I'm gonna expose Bear Baily and get the revenge I rightfully deserve." Producers leaned in. Someone whispered, "Stay ready, here we go." The cameras closed in on Dave. He began to deliver the locker room accusations, names, images of freshman nights, tighty-whities, the sort of tawdry gossip that lives in basements and bleachers. "Let me get this straight," Mary started to ask for clarification. "You're accusing Bear Baily, Eric Holdman, and Marty Bliss of what?" Then Dave got cocky. "I said what I said. Those rough and tough football players you love so much were giving lap dances to their teammates during victory celebrations." His voice trailed into that crude realm of rumor and retribution. The studio clicked. The air tasted like helium and adrenaline. Bear's reaction was physical now. He shoved forward at Dave and chased him. What began as a heated exchange under lights erupted into full-on pursuit, around the studio desks, down the hallways, out the doors. Producers yelled, sound techs scattered, and the co-parenting class turned into a chaotic chorus, racing after them. They chased through the studio, into the parking lot, and all the way out into the street. Cameras kept rolling because live television rarely turns off. The chaos was content, and the world beyond the glass was suddenly an audience holding its breath. And there, amid the squeal of tires and the scramble of bodies, the story turned from petty revenge to something noisier and more dangerous. A wild chase that had no script, no director, and only consequences waiting at the end. Chaos spilled into the evening air like a busted fire hydrant. Cameras from the studio still peeked through the lobby windows, catching the blur of two grown men tumbling into the pavement. Bear caught Dave first. His tackle was quick, brutal, and full of the kind of precision only men with gym memberships and grudges possess. They hit the concrete with a sound that silenced the nearby shouts. Dust rose, elbows flailed. Dave fought like a man defending something bigger than pride, though no one could tell if it was love, jealousy, or pure insanity. Bear locked him into a headlock, tight, efficient, humiliating. Dave kicked, squirmed, and wheezed insults muffled by muscle. For a brief, ridiculous moment, the crowd that had followed from the classroom and the studio formed a shaky half-circle, part horror, part entertainment. Then came the sound that ends every street fight: police sirens. Blue and red lights flashed as two officers rushed in, their voices commanding, weary, and routine. Within seconds, the chaos was split apart. Dave was yanked up by the collar. Bear was pulled off with a grunt of reluctant compliance. Both were handcuffed before they could finish the next curse word. The crowd began to thin, some embarrassed, some satisfied. The classmates muttered to each other like witnesses after a storm. Dr. Davenport sighed, the kind of sigh that teachers reserve for hopeless cases. As the officers led the two men toward the squad car, Keisha broke through the small circle, heels clacking, expression unreadable. Her voice rose in the air, steady and warm like nothing had happened, saying, "I'll bail you out, baby." But, in a cruel twist of timing, Bear, Baily, and Dave both answered at once. "Okay, babe." And as the officers nudged them toward the back seat of the cruiser, Keisha blew a kiss, not to Dave, the man she'd once called her husband, but to Bear. It floated in the air, soft and deliberate, before it landed like a bullet. Dave's face fell. His shoulders sagged. Whatever fight he had left evaporated right there under the flashing lights. The doors closed on both men. Two fools and a whole crowd watching the mess that love and pride had made of them. The echo of the cell door clanging shut was the only applause Dave and Bear got that night. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, harsh and unforgiving. Two men, cuffed by circumstance, sat shoulder to shoulder on a cold metal bench, one breathing heavy, the other too proud to show how tired he was. For the first time there were no cameras, no audience, no Keisha to perform for, just the stale smell of the holding cell and the kind of silence that forces truth out of people. Bear broke it first. "You and Keisha been divorced for what? A year? Almost two? What's your damn problem, man? You still in love?" Dave stared at the floor, at the cracks between the tiles, searching for words he'd already rehearsed 100 times in his head. "It's just hard to let go," he finally said. "We got married. We were so in love, made vows, said, 'Till death do us part.'" He laughed, dry and hollow. "Now we're apart. I had plans," Dave continued, "real plans. I wanted to grow old together, fight over dumb stuff, retire in a nice beach house with matching rocking chairs. I was dumb enough to think death would be the only thing that'd separate us." Bear leaned back, the tough guy edge softening, and asked, "What happened?" Dave sighed and said, "We both got married for all the wrong reasons." For a moment, Bear said nothing. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded. "You know what, Waterboy? I get it." Dave looked up, surprised. "Really? How?" "I was married once," Bear said. "I was young and dumb. Thought I was breaking the family curse of my parents who were married, divorced, married again, divorced again. My folks split when I was 13. He paused, memory tugging at his tone. "Then Mom remarried 2 years later. Whole new man with the same old shit." Dave nodded slowly. "Same here. My mom got remarried too. Stepdad was a complete asshole. Treated us like we were shit on his shoes. I still hate that man. I promised myself my kids would never go through that, not with some stepdad like him." Bear let that sink in before answering. "Oh, I see now. That's your problem. You think just because your stepdad was an asshole to you, you think I'm gonna be one to glory." Bear leaned forward, elbows on knees, speaking with unexpected grace. "Let me tell you something, Dave. After my mom's second husband made our lives hell, I promised myself, if I ever got the chance to be a stepfather, I'd be the best damn stepfather there is. No kid deserves to feel like they don't belong. If I ever had the chance to be there for Glory, I'd love her like she was my very own daughter, and she'd be blessed to have two good men in her life." Dave didn't answer. He just stared at the opposite wall, lips pressed tight, trying not to show the flicker of guilt that had just crossed his mind. Bear smirked and said, "Do us all a favor. Move on." The cell door creaked open. A guard appeared, reading from a clipboard. "Braden Baily?" "You made bail." Bear stood, rubbing his wrists where the cuffs had been. "Guess that's me." He paused at the doorway, looked back at Dave and told him, "I'm sorry this happened. I wish we could have had this conversation under better circumstances." Dave nodded, trying to hide the disappointment that someone else, probably Keisha, had bailed Bear out first. Bear walked out, free again, leaving behind the sound of unspoken peace. Dave sat there a few seconds, staring at the space where Bear had stood. Then, under his breath, he muttered with a crooked grin, "Would be great if you and my baby mama would bail me out." The guard didn't even look up. The hum of the lights carried on. And for the first time, Dave Daniels sat quietly, alone, still, and halfway to finally understanding himself. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, and we appreciate your support.